Okay, you're not. Okay. Hold on. How are you guys today? Hi. How is everyone? Okay, so can you hear now? So I'm dropping chairs. Sorry about that. Whew, that's how it is when you go live, right? So thank you for everybody coming and joining us today on our next edition of Beauty of Blackness Fine Art Show, Art and Culture. And we have a very special guest today. Just looking forward to talking with him and exploring and learning about him. He is a sculptor, and he's actually a magnificent sculptor. We got a chance to talk on Thursday, and I learned a lot on Thursday. So hopefully today you guys will learn a lot from him today. His name is Chukes. I want to make sure I say that right because he spent some time with me making sure to say it right. I want to make sure I get his name right. Is artist and sculptor Chukes. Absolutely phenomenal. Did some research on him. Love what he does. He has such an amazing passion for what he does. A lot of times sculptors have different reasons for why they sculpt, but his goes beyond just sculpting. His work is beyond just sculpting. It is a passion that he brings out in each and every piece. And so I'm going to bring him up because me talking about him is nothing compared to learning about him and what he does. So I'm going to bring him up. Here he is. Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Can you unmute your mic? Your mic is muted. So go ahead and unmute it. There we go. So now we can hear you very well. It is a pleasure to have you here on the show. You and I talked extensively on Thursday, but I wanted to make sure that people got an opportunity to hear about you, learn about you. You are absolutely amazing. And I truly appreciate you being here on the show with us today. And I'd just like for you to just start off just sharing a little bit about yourself, just sharing a little bit about yourself with the audience.
Well, thank you for having me on your show, Louise. I think this is great what you're doing. I want to say that first. This is something very new and different right now. Having the opportunity to speak over the internet. This is a new chapter in my life, but I mean, I'm getting used to it, and I think it's something that's very important. And look, I just congratulate you for doing this. I mean, artists at this time, we really need this voice, and you're doing an incredible job of giving us this voice. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you for being a part of it. Thanks for that.
Well, thank you again for having me. To answer your question, as far as my background, I really don't know where to start. I mean, I could start from my childhood. I mean, all I could say is I had two notions as a child, and one that I love my family, and the other one, as soon as I touched art, I knew that's what I was going to become. I mean, I was given something, and I knew it as a very young child. I knew it. And not only did I know it, well, actually my mother knew it before I knew it. Well, she knew what all her sons were going to become. But my mother knew it, and she did everything in her power to put me in a position where I am today, which is, becoming a sculptor, becoming an artist.
Okay, so your mother had a huge hand in basically what who you are today as an artist.
Of course. I mean, I want to say this to mothers, even if you don't understand what your child's gift is, just sometimes it's best to sometimes leave them alone. They'll figure it out themselves. You just guide them. Don't take that gift away from them, because it won't come back again. It won't come back to that child again. It'll go on to someone else. But for you mothers and fathers and anyone else that has that gift or sees it in a child, the worst thing you could do is take that gift away from them. Tell that child that, that they can't do this, and especially art, because so many people don't understand the process of creating and what it means, especially for us as Black folks. I don't really believe that we've been given the credit for who we are and what we've created. And for me as an artist, it's very important that I am able to speak and create. But more than speaking and creating, it's more important that I leave a legacy behind.
Okay.
And that's what I'm about. I mean, what I create will be here long after I'm gone. So it's important that I utilize what's happening around me, my surroundings, incorporate all of that into my work.
Okay. So I could definitely see that. And you're speaking to me too, because I have children, and a lot of times it's hard. What I notice is it is hard for parents, and me included, because I'm in that whole parent genre of where it is difficult to let your kid go, because you're always, as a mother, you're always looking at the not wanting your kids to fail. Not wanting them to fail. And so you end up stepping in, and actually a lot of times you end up stepping in to their detriment, not necessarily for good. And that's one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes as parents you do. So I'm glad you said that, because your mom actually allowed you to be creative, and she allowed you to explore not just the arts, but who you were as an artist, which I think is pretty magnificent. And, there's times I wish I had just had that insight, because I do, as a mother, you do end up doing a lot more than you need to do for your kid. And so I think that's very important. So I'm glad you said that and brought that out. So thank you for saying that, because that is very, very helpful. So, so basically your art kind of started when you were young.
Oh, it didn't kind of, it started. It started. I mean, I can remember, I had this great love and affinity for Tinker Toys. And I had a friend down the street that just had just thousands of them. And so all the kids in the neighborhood would go, and we'd have all these grandiose ideals of what we were going to build with these Tinker Toys. And so you'd start off with, 10 kids, in my friend's house. But at the end of the day, I was the last one there. And I'd be there, for hours, but I didn't even know. And I would build these things, and then I would go home, and then I would get ready to leave. But at the end of the day, I know my friends would always come back to see what I created.
Okay.
They always came back. And that kind of things, when those things happen, I mean, as a child, I didn't think about that, but much later in life, I thought about, the importance of that. And I remember I hurt my leg really bad, and I couldn't go outside for about a week or so. I cut my leg real bad, and I was laid up. And I remember the day I got home from the hospital, the door knocked. I heard the door knock, and I heard my mother say, well, my son, he can't come out and play right now. And then she says, okay, but can you give him this? And so she came back in my room, and it was a big old box of Tinker Toys. I mean, and that just let me know as a kid, I was like 6 or 7 years old, but that let me know that something is going on here where people are paying attention to what it is that that you're doing. I wasn't even aware of that, but my friends were. My friend's mother had enough insight to say, "Hey, this kid this means something to him. He's creating these great things with Tinker Toys. This means something." So, I mean, it's a thing that humbles you, because you say to yourself that I'm not the one that I'm not the greatest artist or so and so, and I've done all this all by myself. But that's the worst thing as an artist could say. That's so egotistic, because there are so many people in your life that help you become who you are, and you have to be aware of that, and that's why I try to incorporate that into my life and into what I create.
I know, and that's what's interesting. I'm really glad you said that, because there are a lot of people that are in our lives that make deposits, and honestly, it could be, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge deposit, because one of the things that we had talked about in our initial meeting was when I had asked you about your schooling, and you shared with me that schooling wasn't, it's like it wasn't that what inspired you, because you were already inspired. And it wasn't that what gave you that push, because you already had it. Those are things you already had on the inside of you. And you were talking about, but you did use school to learn another aspect of who you were, or to explore that particular portion of who you were.
Yes. I consider myself a self-taught artist. I mean, in terms of, and not again being selfish, I can't give credit to the schools. I would if I was going to give credit to any school, it would be my high school art teacher, Mr. Shannon, who just one day he's like, I'm in high school, and I think I was like a freshman or sophomore, and he just saw how I was connected with clay, and he says he had this room that he wouldn't let anybody go into. And he says, "Hey, come on back here." And I was like, "Okay." So I go back in the room, and class was out. And he opened the door, and I'm like, I wanted to know what was in that room. And I look in the room, and there's stacks of beer.
Okay.
I'm like, Mr. Shannon, I says, man, I'm 15 years old. I said, I don't drink beer. He's like, no. So he had some beer I never even seen before. He opened it up, and he had this big vat of clay, and he was pouring it in the clay. And then he says, so the next day I came back into his class, and he took that clay, and he says, watch this. He put it on the wheel, and he threw this pot, and it did exactly everywhere he moved his hands, it just did it. And he wanted to show me that, because even though I wasn't into pottery, he just wanted to show me his love, because he knew he and I had the same affinity for clay. But getting back to your to school, I mean, school for me was one of the most important aspects of my creativity, because it allowed me to have the opportunity to write about my history, to learn methods of exploring my history, to see how we've been left out of history, to understand the importance of guiding other artists into documenting our history. And that's what I went to school for, to learn those tools. Most of my instructors, they told me, when I went into college, they says, you're more advanced than we are. There's really nothing we could teach you. And that bothered me. It really did. It really bothered me, because I'm like, I'm a young man, and I'm here to learn. And you're so intimidated by what I do, you don't even try to teach me. You don't even try. You just kind of just leave me alone. But in some ways, that was kind of good. It just left me alone, because it just allowed me to work.
Right. So you were able to explore on your own. So in your opinion, it's better to allow creativity to develop on its own, as opposed to overly instructing. Because I know that's one of the things that I encountered just in my teaching kids and things like that, was to And it's one of the things that I would often share with parents is that it's easier to allow your kids to kind of develop on their own. Not saying that you don't want to give them, because there is instructional teaching, like how to create, proportions and making sure that your different parts are proportionately correct. Sort of like with a face and things like that, making sure your face is proportionally correct. So would you say that kind of information in school is good, because that way they're kind of, it's not necessarily developing their creativity, but just giving them tools to use with their creativity?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even though my instructors told me there wasn't anything that they could teach me, I could learn so much from them. I mean, I was just observant. The sad part about that is I saw a lot of very talented people in my life that could have used instruction and didn't get it. And as a result, they went down a different path. And a lot of them just destroyed their lives. I mean, I had friends that were way more talented than me, but they didn't have the environment I had. We had ourselves as friends, and we would critique our work and talk about it and whatnot. We were critiquing our work before we even knew what critiquing work was.
Right.
We didn't know what it meant, but we were doing that because we were all, in some sort of way, we had, these gifts of things that we could do. But our instructors, their parents didn't nurture them.
And nurture them in that way.
Yeah, the way the way I've seen them nurture other students, so, and especially Black students, we just kind of got left
out.
Yeah, we got left out, I mean, and no matter how talented you were, you got left out. I mean, my first adventure, my first, I'd say adventure into college was not as an artist. It was an athlete. I got a full scholarship, to go run track and field. And it's funny because I would go to my art classes. I mean, and this was back in the 80s when, an athlete, you didn't have to show up to school. I hate to say that, but they didn't have as stringent rules as they have now. You really didn't have to show up to school. And my instructors would look at me like, why are you here? I mean, you don't really have to be here. And if you were a really good athlete, you didn't have to show up. And so they figured I'm taking a ceramics class because it's like just an easy class.
Right.
Well, I would go to track practice, and then I would come back to the studio and create. Because I just felt so uncomfortable in that environment where they weren't teaching me anything. So I just like, hey, I got a free studio. I'm going to come back here and teach myself, what to do, And so I would create work and come back, and the classmates would say, well, who did that? And it was me, it was me. So, I mean, it's just, I had a real awkward, involvement with school, and when I left school, when my track and field scholarship ran out, I left with a 4.0 grade point average.
Oh, wow.
But the school never took the time to say, hey, man, you're really talented. Let's continue your education and give you a full art scholarship. I had to wait 10 more years until, because I have a daughter too, and I took time off to raise my daughter till she got old enough. And then I went back to school and finished getting my degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it was, because that's what it sounds like. You had a lot of talent, and you kind of got caught in that whole sports, sort of like that sports scholarship. This is, this Black guy, he's a sports guy, and that's all we're going to allow him to be. That's what it sounds like. You kind of got caught in that vein, as opposed to allowing you to explore your artistic talent. in a sense. So now you're a clay artist. You work in clay, or you're a ceramic artist. You create pieces in that particular medium, the clay medium. And you've actually, and I've seen your work is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm going to share some of it here. But I also wanted to just share a little bit of this video of you working, because it is absolutely amazing, and we talked about that. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share a little bit of that. I know we can't share the whole thing, but if you want to see the video, it is called Hands of Clay, and it shows a little bit of his process. We're going to show some of his process, some of Chukes' process, so that you can actually see his process. Because for me, when he and I originally start talking, because I've done ceramics, but he clearly showed me I was doing it all wrong. And his process is so amazing until I'm actually going to be doing some more. So if you want to talk a little bit about your process, you can do that as well, as I'm showing the video, because I'll just show a portion of it. Okay.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the video starts out. This is my studio, by the way.
Okay. And all right, I can start it from. Let's start it. There we go.
Yeah, that's the beginning. This is the beginning of the pandemic. So I said I had 600 pounds of clay, and I just locked myself in my studio. And I've been in my studio since the pandemic, just creating. These are some of the pieces that I created during the pandemic. That's the first piece that I created. So just different angles of different pieces. The pandemic is, it's been heartbreaking, because I do have friends that have close family members who have, gotten the coronavirus, and some have passed away as a result of it. So it's serious, and I take it very serious. But I think, and I didn't know how bad it was going to be. But, these particular pieces, this is what happens when you're totally isolated. I mean, I think I would create like this regardless of isolation, but I do think the effect of isolation has had, it's had another effect on me as well. It's given me a chance to reflect on who I am. And it's funny because these particular pieces, my wife and I, we took a trip to Europe, and we spent 3 weeks there. We spent a week in London, a week in Geneva, and a week and then a week in Paris. And me, of course, I spent 2 days in the Louvre. They had to throw me out, basically. Well, I mean, it was my first time, seeing that amount of work, and that in the Louvre. I've never been there before, and it wasn't the work so much that it was the volume of work that was phenomenal. But when I got to thinking about it, I said, I want my work in the Louvre. I said, I believe I'm good enough of an artist to have my work amongst those type of artists themselves. And I'm not being arrogant or egotistic about what I'm saying. That's just what I believe, and I think as an artist, you should believe that in yourself. Otherwise, I don't think you really have any business creating. If you don't have supreme confidence in what it is you're doing, you're wasting your time. And I know that sounds kind of hard, but it takes time to develop that, though. It takes time to understand who you are and the materials you work with. Now, you say ceramicist. People say, hey, Chukes, you're a ceramicist. I'm like, no, I'm not a ceramicist.
Right.
I'm a sculptor who works with clay.
Okay. Right. Okay. And that's why I was like, ceramicist just didn't sound right for me when I said it, because you're a sculptor. You're a sculptor. You're not someone, and I'm speaking as ceramicist, as someone who actually was doing ceramics. It's like you said, one of the reasons why ceramics didn't work with me is because I wasn't into functional, creating functional art. I wasn't into that. And so connecting, I feel like I really connected with what you're doing because you work as a sculptor in clay. And that's a huge difference from being a ceramicist.
Yes, it is. I mean, it is because, I look at, first of all, you have to understand clay. You have to understand that is probably the first material, the first creative material man put their hands on. That's the first material. And it was utilitarian because at some time before, after fire was invented, somehow or another, this clay or this material, they found that it changed molecularly. It changed from a soft material to a harder material to something that you could use as a living, to live. I mean, to create vessels and bowls and cups and whatever, to eat off of. So it took you off the planes of, eating off the ground to, I guess, a more sophisticated level. So it was our first tool, for life.
Okay.
I mean, so that's my point. I mean, clay gave us, it allowed us to better our life. And if you look and understand the what clay is made up of, it's got the same minerals as the human body.
Okay.
I mean, we all come from the clay. So I consider myself as recreating a life, not human life, but just recreating life with clay. So I think if you understand the importance of clay, and that to me is the difference between ceramicists and an artist, because a ceramicist, I mean, they want to make something functional and then they want to glaze it and it's beautiful and it becomes, utilitarian. But this is something, I mean, and in some ways it becomes disposable. This is something that, for me is my life. My life is represented in what I do with this clay. It has more than that aspect of a functional property. When I'm creating, I'm putting the essence of who I am as a human being into all my work, all my knowledge. I'm putting it in here and I'm simplifying it. So, I mean, I create, we were talking the other day, I create these pieces. It took me 2 or 3 days to make this particular piece, which is here it is behind me. But it took me 2 or 3 days to make this piece, but it took me 40 years to get to the point to make it. And so that's just understanding your work. It's very important that you understand your material. And I think that's where a lot of artists fall short. They don't take the time to understand their material. They're very gifted with it, but I think you have to understand it. And that's the thing with clay. There's no particular way to approach clay. Because every way you approach it, it's going to work for you some way or another. I just found the way that worked best for me, because for me, I didn't want to sit here making coils all day, or I didn't want to make a solid piece, cut it in half and then dig it out and then put it back together. I didn't want to do that. I took what I learned from a child working with Tinker Toys and applied that knowledge of building clay like it was a Tinker Toy to where I'm at right now. So I went all the way back to my childhood. That's why it's so important to remember those things that you learn as a child, and you incorporate those ideals into what it is you're doing right now. I lost you. I lost your volume.
Okay, there we go. All right. So you work, as opposed to coils, as opposed to working with a solid mass of clay. That's what I noticed is you work with working with it, just flat slabs. That's how you laid it out when you first started from day one. You laid out these flat slabs. And so, because when I learned how to create busts and things like that, it was working from a solid piece of clay, cutting it in half, digging it out, and then putting it back together. But you've taken it to a whole different level. And like you had said, this is how they worked with clay back when. They weren't working with these large pieces of clay. They were working more in a slab form, because you could look at when you see some of the bowls that have been dug up and things like that, they were working more in a slab as opposed to working with big chunks of clay.
Well, you develop an ideal and something that you feel that, once again, that works best for you, and you go for it. My thing with creating is, I always want to see what the piece looks like. I can't wait to see. I see it in my head. I see what it looks like, but I'm also, at the same time, I'm having a conversation with the clay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's talking to me. It's telling me, okay, that's enough with that. Go on to the next part. That looks good. Maybe you can come back and do a little bit more to me later on right now, but right now that looks good. And then sometimes the clay will do things, it'll slump and move over. And your first idea was like, no, I don't want it to do that. But then you step back and you look at it and you say, that's the clay talking to you. That's your material. It's telling you. You're having, really, and a lot of artists, they don't take the time to look at that, because they have a preconceived ideal of what they think it should be. And when something different happens, they're like, oh no, I don't want that to happen. Then they lose out on it. They just lose out on that. I mean, I remember way back when I was first starting out, I had a piece that I thought was beautiful, and then it fell down on the ground, and the whole side of it just got, it got smashed.
Okay.
And I mean, most people would just say, look at it and take it apart and step on it. And I picked it up and I looked at it and I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. I mean, that is beautiful. I mean, and that was one of the first instances that I saw clay talking to me.
Okay.
So it got a little, distorted, but I kind of straightened out a little bit of it. And then I left it alone. And then I left, that part of it where it got smashed and, flattened on the side, and it worked beautifully. I mean, I loved it. I love that piece.
I know I've had that kind of encounter with my work. People would ask, well, Louise, how long does it take you to create a piece? And I said, well, it depends on the piece. I said, because I don't rush my artwork and I wait for the art to speak to me. And so I've had paintings where the painting took me 2 years because I got a portion of the painting, and then I had this one piece, and the garment never came. And then 2 years later, the garment came, and I finished the garment. And it was one of the first things that I sold at one of the art expos, is because that piece wasn't ready. So I totally understand how allowing your artwork to talk to you when it and becoming ready to do certain things. It's like you said, it'll tell you, okay, you've done enough right here, come back later and relook at it. So I totally understand that portion where you allow the artwork to kind of form on its own, or form as you're creating it, as opposed to you have an idea, but you also allow the artwork to have its own sort of thought process.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, because it's an inanimate object doesn't mean it's not alive. I mean, what you're doing is you're making an inanimate object. I'm making a bag of clay come alive.
Right.
I'm giving it an emotion. I'm putting my essence into the work. I'm putting my knowledge, my understanding. The day I felt horrible, or the day I felt good, or the day, just I felt like nothing was going right. I mean, I'm working on a series now titled my meditative series, where I'm thinking nothing but good thoughts. And they're little small pieces, no larger than 20 inches tall, and pieces I'm creating in a day. And I love them. I just love them to death. I've got 5 of them so far. I can't wait to get back into my studio and start on the next piece.
Oh, I can't wait to see those. Your work is magnificent, so I can't wait to see those. Now, what I'd like for you share with me about, because I know a lot of artists listen to music and things like that. Share with me a little bit about that portion of you, as far as listening to music and exploring that in your art.
Well, I consider myself, as we were speaking the last time, I consider myself more of a musician than I do an artist, simply because musicians, out of all the creative people in the world, those are the ones that have influenced me more than anything. I was telling you about my love for Funkadelic, for George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy Collins. I mean, all of that type of psychedelic music they call it, you know, whatever. It, for me, that just allowed me to just, I mean, George got a cut called "Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow, the Kingdom of Heaven is Within." And that kind of says it all for me. I mean, when you hear goofy stuff like that and you're like 12, 13 years old, I mean, it really, it sunk into my head. I understood it. I understood where George was coming from. And I hung out with George. I spent some time with George. And George is on a whole nother level. I mean, George has some of my art. He does, you know. I spent some time with that cat, you know, and George was somewhere else, you know. I mean, I had his publicist before I got married. He spent a month with me, and he took me to places. I don't do drugs. I don't do none of that stuff. But every time I came home, I was high. It wasn't off of drugs though. You know, it was just hanging out with him, you know, just being in that vibe. But, you know, music, you know, I'm a vinyl junkie. I have over, 10,000 albums. I've been collecting since I was 12 and 13 years old. And, you know, when you hear Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, you know, it took me 30 years before I understood what that meant. But I got it when I was like, you know, in my teens, and every 10 years I would play it because I remember hearing like Bitches Brew, that's the baddest stuff out there. I'm like, wow, what is that? And I'm like, I didn't understand it. And then every 10 years, every decade I would listen to it, I would understand it more and more until now I'm like, I get it now. I get it. And that was like the development of my art. You know, it's like, it's going to take you time, man. You know, you're not going to just, you have this gift now, but you got to develop it. You have to understand it, you know, and music allowed me to understand it because I'm hearing these great musicians just improvise and just, I mean, I've always played the B-side. I didn't care about the commercialized cuts they put on the radio. I didn't, they were cool. If you go to the club, that was good. But I wanted to hear the real way out funky stuff where they just let go. And I'm like, when you let go, I'm like, okay, if they're doing this as a musician, what does this look like? How can I create this? I mean, you hear the sound. I was watching a video on Sonny Rollins yesterday, and he was blowing to the gods. But I'm like, after he finished, the music was gone. I want to know what it looks like when that music is gone. How do I capture that music and bring it into my world? How do I make a piece of art that lets you see this is what I think this music is?
And that's basically what I see in your work. And because I just want to share this piece because I love this piece and I pulled it off of your website. I know I have other pieces, but I pulled this piece off of your website because after we talked, it's like you could just see her enjoying the melody. You could just see her enjoying the music. She is just relaxed in it. And that's the other thing I want to talk about is you know, how you do your forms, because you allow it's not traditional. You put appendages everywhere. You kind of do what you do, but it's your work is music. It expresses music so well. You could literally feel her enjoyment of the music.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what the piece is about, and the piece is titled "The Conductor."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she is conducting music. She is just basking in the glow and the love of what it is that she's hearing.
Mm-hmm.
She, you know, and I just, you know, I wanted to capture that. I mean, I love music so much. I mean, I don't want the sound to go away. I just want to be able to relive it. Every time I hear some beautiful music, I want to relive it through what I've created. And this is my way of bringing that music back to life through what I create. Now, the thing about this piece too is she is now a part of a new series of work that I've created and exhibit titled Identity Theft. So she has two names to her. The name here is the conductor. But when it comes to identity theft, the name is the conductor, hands up or I'll shoot. and I mean, I had to include it, and I mean, it's AKA hands up or I'll shoot. And so under that is a line by the Isley Brothers said, I try to play my music. They said my music too loud. I tried talking about it. I got the big runaround. I try to roll with the punches, but I got knocked on the ground by all this bullshit going down. And that's exactly what's happening in our world right now. They're taking our music away. They're taking our life away. They're killing us. They're killing the young kids. So it was important that I incorporated this into the work that I'm doing right now, which is identity theft, because I'm still trying to make that connection. I'm showing my love, but I'm also showing that you're killing a generation that doesn't get a chance to think like this, to work like this, to do this. So I'm bringing those memories back so we can understand how important that is in our lives, and people will stop killing our youth, our young male Black youth.
Right, right. And that's so, I mean, that in itself is so important. And even like when we were talking, the other thing that I noticed about your work and what I read about your work is the fact that you do use a lot of female in your work. You use a lot of females. And one of the things that you had said during that time, and this goes back to when you were in school, you sought out more English and understanding how to translate your history, translate your thoughts. But you also, one of the things that you said in one of your bios was you liked creating females because you felt that they were a little more in touch with their emotions, a little more in touch with their feelings.
No, they are a lot more in touch with their emotions. And
I'm trying to get a brother a little bit. I'm trying to get a brother.
Look, I grew up in an environment where, you know, there was a preconceived notion of what a man was supposed to be, and you're not supposed to show your emotions. You're not supposed to cry. You're not just supposed to hug and love. And you know, I'm an artist. You know, I'm like, if I was like that, I guarantee you would not be seeing the work that I'm doing. I'd probably be, I don't know what I'd be doing, you know, but I wouldn't be creating art. I mean, every woman that I've been around, including my wife, she's my soulmate. She keeps me, she puts me in check when I need to be put in check. She keeps me grounded. I mean, right now, it's like, man, we think we're all that. Look, if I didn't have my wife right now, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You know, we really wouldn't. You know, we wouldn't, because what I do is create art. I mean, when the pandemic stopped, my whole connection with art and financially and everything just went out the window. And I had all these great shows lined up. You know, fortunately, I have a woman, you know, who understands her husband, and she has, her life is, been
Kind of altered.
She's embraced me. She embraced what I do,
Mhm.
and I think that's a problem that a lot of families and relationships have. When times get really hard, they fall apart. But going back to emotions, I mean, when you see that you have that kind of love, of course I've gotten it from my mother. I had to give it to my daughter because I was a single father raising a young child, a young girl, and I grew up around all boys. And so that was a whole different thing. You gotta, play with dolls and, play play house with your daughter, I mean, you got to do all these goofy things with a girl, and I didn't know how to do that, but I'm like, okay, I can't be some macho masculine man and not, yeah, kid, I ain't gonna do that. I'm like, no. So I'm like, I would just play have fun, play the games with my daughter. I mean, and those emotions, they go into you as an artist. You don't, I didn't run from them. I've never run from my emotions. I embrace them. And I embrace them because I've seen women, most of them I've seen, they embrace their emotions. They embrace them. And it's made me such a better artist. It's made me so much better.
I can tell your work you can literally tell in your work, we're going to show a little bit of your progression, and you could literally show, you can tell, I can literally tell in your work the passion and the emotion that goes into, I'm just going to bring this portion of the piece back. There's such a passion in it, and you can see the love and the love that you put into them, and the it's how you actually create these your female ones, the understanding that you put into it. And I can tell that you've connected with females on a certain level based on the elegance and there's such an elegance your pieces possess. The elongated neck, the tilting of the head, there's just such an elegance that you create in these pieces. And so I can tell that you have connected emotionally, not just with the females, but also emotionally with yourself by allowing your emotions to. And would you say that also came about? I would say that also came about in your music because you connected so emotionally with your music.
Well, I'm improvising just like a musician, I mean, you improvise, My thing is with improvisation, you're not reading off of your scales. You're not reading notes. Your mind, it just takes you somewhere else. You just go somewhere else. And then you go back to your notes if you're playing that particular song. But for me, like, I don't use models. I don't make drawings. I just see something. I have a vision in my head and it allows me to improvise. I just think I don't think I could sit there with somebody looking at me, me looking at them, trying to create that image. Because even if I did, it wouldn't look like them. Because I want to create an emotion. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned about, my pieces look anatomically correct in some ways, but the elongation of the neck, that comes from my African ancestry. I'm pulling from all of that.
Right.
So when you don't when you just let your mind go and you don't use any other tools, as far as, what you're looking at, then you could create what you want to create. You're not confined in a box. You just create you just let it go where your mind takes you. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just letting I just let it go. And you have to be aware of your emotions in order to know that, you just got to let it go and have confidence and faith enough that when you come out of that trance, what you've created, is going to be something that, people will, attract to it. But I don't want to say people. I'm like, I love my art, period. I personally don't care what anybody thinks. I mean, I've heard people say, man, this is some weird stuff. I'm like, well, then if that's what you think, man, I mean, I think it's funny. I'm like, okay, I know it's weird, but I mean, I'm a weird dude then, I mean, I just let my mind go, I'm not afraid. I just let it go.
Now, one of the things that I noticed when I watched this video, because I watched it the other day for my own benefit, is you definitely do not use a lot of traditional things. Like I'm sitting here watching you use a fork, or at least that's what it looks like, a fork, with a flat handle, which is kind of amazing. The other thing I noticed is, in ceramics, you learn to use slip and all that kind of stuff, and you use a spray bottle to create that. And so you literally work with a fairly, it's your sculpting is fairly dry. I'm not saying it's fully dry, because a lot of times, wet clay is wet. So how do you go about creating this without it being so wet?
Well, if you, for those of you that want to see the video from the beginning, you go to the beginning, you'll see that I cut the clay straight out of the bag and I threw it on the ground in slabs. The slabs are no larger than about a half an inch, high. And then I let it sit on the cement overnight. And what that does is that takes all the moisture out. It still makes the clay soft enough and pliable enough to work, but it makes it stronger. So sometimes you have to let it sit there for a while, but that's understanding the clay. It takes a while to understand when you can work with clay. So just because I threw it on the ground and then the next day, I work with it, doesn't mean that's going to necessarily work for you. You got to know, you got to feel the clay. And there's a point where okay, this is not, they have something called leather hard, where you can work with it, but it's at a point where if you let it get any harder, then you can't work with it anymore. You can't really sculpt with it anymore with water, because it starts cracking. So you have to understand the clay. So I just got the clay to a point where I know I can start building with it. And that's the most important part. So people think, okay, well, I'm going to start creating this straight out the bag. Well, you can't do it straight out the bag. You have to let the clay dry. Let it dry a little bit. Okay. Let it dry. And now that tool I was using was a fork. I've had that tool since 1999. I was an artist resident in Leimert Park Fine Art Gallery, and the director of the gallery was eating with that fork. And I said, "Hey, Earl, man," I said, "That's a nice looking fork, man. Let me see that." He thought I was nuts. And I took that fork and I've been using it ever since, ever since it's one of the greatest tools I've ever had. And then you go back to, what primitive is, what tools did primitive man have? We don't need, I got a ton of art tools, but I use maybe 5 tools in my creative process. The one I have in my hand right now, I've had it about 40 years. Okay. Yes. Those tools, there's certain tools that I use that you just, you have an infinity with, and they just become part of what you do. So your tools are very, very important. Another thing with tools, I'm giving you my secrets. Make sure they're clean. You always see me rubbing them. What I'm doing is taking the excess clay off the tips. Clean them off, because you don't want to be working. You can't get into details when you got a clump of clay at the end of the tip.
You're right. Just watching you work, because you literally were completing these with it. Look how magnificent that is. That is absolutely magnificent. And you were literally creating these in what, 7 days, 7 days?
This one took me 3 days.
Okay, so this was 3 days of work.
Yeah, because I'm including the day it took me. I think it took me 3 or 4 days, including the day it took to dry. Yeah, I took the clay. That's a day, and then I think 3 days of work.
And how long do you let it sit to dry?
Oh, I wait. I let it dry for a couple of weeks. You
Mhm.
know, you want it bone dry. You know,
Right.
you want it before I put it in my kiln. You know,
Mhm.
I got to make sure that it's you know it's dry, dry, dry. You know,
Mhm.
and then you know you put it in your kiln, and then I turn my kiln up to about 200 degrees, and I
Mhm.
do what they call candling. I let it candle for a day, which
Mhm.
sucks out all the moisture, and then the next day I'll go in and I'll fire it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you suck out the rest of the moisture that may be left in there
Yes.
before you do all that. Now, I know you had said, and you don't have to give out any secrets, but you do not use glaze.
No, no, no. I tried glaze. I had to when I was in undergrad, and I hated it. I
Mhm.
hated it. But I mean, it was a requirement, and it was also a learning process. But the process I learned was that I hated it. Well, and there's a reason why. Because for me, you see the detail in my work.
Mhm.
I mean, there's fine edge to the detail. The
Mhm.
minute you put glaze on there, you've worked all hard, you know, put all that time in to making detail, and then you put a slop of glaze on there, and it takes it away. You lose the
Oh,
detail.
because it
You
goes
lose it.
into areas you don't want it to go in.
Yeah, yeah. And then say the color doesn't come out right.
Mhm.
You know, with my process, if I don't like the color, I'll recolor it again, and I can
Okay.
recolor it over and over and over again until I get the color right.
So now, do you put the color on top and then fire it, or is that it's more like a patina where you're working with it while you're adding color and heat at the same time?
After after the piece is fired, then the color goes on.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
and then it's not refired again.
No, no,
Okay,
no, no,
okay.
no.
So it's because because I know you also work in bronze, or
Yes.
I think we talked about that before. You also work in bronze. So you also work in, when you're working in bronze, are you working with an oil-based clay?
Yeah, yeah. But
Mhm.
some of my clay sculptures, I just made a cast,
Okay.
and you know, and just turn them into bronze.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
once you finish them in clay, so now do you do your own molds as well?
Yeah, I can make my own molds. I had to learn that process in undergrad, the lost wax
Mhm.
casting process, which is the oldest process, but they have so many new technologies now. I mean, with they got a new process now. I mean, it wouldn't even be feasible for me to do the lost cast waxing process.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's just you know, I mean, it just technology has gotten, you know, so advanced as far as, you know, making bronze pieces now. You know, I mean, I just got a phone call, not a phone call, but an email from someone in China who wanted me to ship my work to China because they wanted to bronze it, and then they were going to ship it back to me. Well, I'm not going to do that. You know, no, I mean, I was flattered. You know, I was flattered, but I'm like, no, I just, you know, I was flattered that someone in China, you know, took notice of my work, you
Right.
know, and wanted to recreate it in bronze. You know, I mean, I really was, you know, so.
But yeah, they recreated in bronze over and over and over again.
Yeah, I know. That's
The only thing about sending things to China is that they would definitely recreate your work.
and I wouldn't see a dime. Yeah, I wouldn't see a dime of it. Yeah.
So we got, that we have been getting some really great comments. People that are thinking your work is absolutely amazing, which is what I think as well. James Brown, who is a really good friend of mine, and he's a anchor on one of the stations. It said your work is amazing, and Miss Johnson also. So if you guys have questions, you're welcome to ask questions as well while he's here, because then that way he can answer your questions right here in real time. So if you have any questions, like we said, we are interviewing artist and sculptor Chukes, and he is absolutely amazing. We've been enjoying this time. This is the Beauty of Blackness Fine Art Show, the art and culture, and we are on every Saturday at 6 o'clock. So definitely tune in. You can actually find Chukes' work on his website, which is chukesart.com. Definitely go and visit. He has some absolutely amazing work. I'm going to show a few other pieces of his and just let him share about it. If you guys have some questions, definitely let me know, ask them. That's why we're here. So I'm going to show this particular piece because I think this is an amazing piece as well. And just to have you share a little bit about this particular piece, I'm going to move you over here so they can see you and not me.
This piece is titled "Protector of the Next Generation." Mm-hmm. When I first did the piece and I actually posted it on Facebook, I got a ton of compliments of people saying, "Oh, we love seeing mothers caressing and loving their children." And so I had to, and I don't usually do that because I don't, I enjoy the comments, I do, but I had to write an under comment and let people know that this is not a woman, that this is a man. This is a male, because I felt that it's very important that we show men loving our children, especially in this day and age, especially Black men. So this man is jet black and there's no question about it. So, and you look at his hands have veins and strength and struggle, and they show more emotion than the male's face. But if you look at the baby's face, the baby is just comforted. They're not threatened. They know that they're protected. They know that their father loves them. And this is not a self-portrait, but this is a self-portrait of the love I had for my daughter. This is how I felt about her. This is how I felt about what my responsibility as a man was to my daughter and how I was going to take care of her. And once she got on her own, she would do what she has to do. But for the time that she's with me, no one's going to ever pry my hands from and do anything to hurt my daughter. So that's just, the philosophy that went into protector of the next generation, because I feel that right now, what's happening with young Black males and our children, men, we have to stand up and be fathers to our children. We have to. It's very important for us to do that now. We have to show that we love our children. Women always get all the credit, but men, we got to stand up now. Stand up. And we do. We know we do. We do. We do, but we don't get the credit for it. So I'm just showing a piece that shows the credit for it.
Right. And that's a beautiful piece. And you're right. I would have thought it was a woman because we are always, this is women. Because one of the things that I did, I created a mother's love piece, but I also created a father's love piece. And so it is, men do need that credit because there are men and fathers out there taking care of their children and loving them. We did get a question from Lorna, I think it's Lorna, and she said, what drew you to sculpting? Or what drew you to sculpture?
As a child, I drew a lot. And I mean, when my parents couldn't buy me something, I would draw it, but I would make it 10 times better than what it was. But the thing was, it was on a flat two-dimensional form. And I wanted to bring that flat two-dimensional form to life. So when I got my hands on clay, which was in the 5th grade, I no longer had to draw anymore. I could make it tactile. I could make what I wanted. I could pick it up and look at it and touch it from all angles. And that just sculpture gave what I did, my creativity, another life. I didn't have to hang it on the wall. I could pick it up. I could feel it. I could touch it. The process was completely different. It was like recreating myself in a sense.
Now, here's a question that I wanted to ask, and I didn't get a chance to, because we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes, is because one of the things that you said was when you create, you don't use images only the images in your mind. And I guess what I would want to know is these images in your mind, are they reflective of the women that have been a part of the molding and sculpting of who you are?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, right now, my wife shows up in all my work. I mean, regardless of what, look, here's a, that's a picture of her right now, but that's my version of a picture of my wife right now.
Is it this one, the one on the
wall?
The
painting, yes. And it has this look that she gives me when I'm doing something I don't have no business doing. Yeah, and it's like it makes me feel like I'm like 5 years old again, you know, like I'm being scolded. And I didn't even know it had that look until I looked at it one day, and I call it the look. You know, that look, and there's two of them I did. There's look number 1 and the look number 2, and that's just. And she wasn't there when I painted it. You know, it just so happened that, you know, it was with my wife.
The look kind of stayed with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing. I really enjoyed this. I want to show, I'm going to add this back to the screen just to show the completed work so people can see how absolutely beautiful that piece turned out. And I'm really glad that you created this video, because it really shows your process, how you went about your process, and then not just your process, but the beauty and emotions that go into this particular process. Now, did you listen to music with this particular piece, or did you just create this particular piece?
No, this piece, I wanted to just show my process. I didn't want to have any music. I didn't want to have any interruption. So it was very different for me to just go in and create this piece and not have any music. But believe me, when I left my studio and went back to my house, I was playing my music. You know, I was. So I'm like, I had enough of it in me, but I felt that because this was the first time I had ever done anything like this, show my process, that I just wanted to just be me in the clay.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I didn't want to have any disruptions. Not that music is a disruption, but I just wanted people to just see how this process works without anything in the background.
Yeah. Well, that was, I mean, that particular video, like I said, if you guys want to see his process, just go check out his YouTube page. And it is called Hands of Clay. It is absolutely amazing. Especially if you're into sculpting or you want to get more into sculpting. This is an amazing video to watch, because like I said, he totally changed my thought process about sculpting. Watching this video just showed me new ways of doing things. And I have worked with ceramics for a number of years. I did it in college. I did wheel throwing and all those kind of things. And I gave it up because of the wetness of it, and because it was messy. Not that I had been sculpting. And so I ended up going more into oil-based clay. But I've always wanted to get back into the water-based clay, and you have really helped me with that. So I really appreciate that. So like I said, if you are interested in seeing his process, and not just seeing his process, go to his website and see his work, because his work is absolutely amazing. Being able to see all of the different things he does. I'm going to put his website up again. Here it is. Go to his website. It's chukesart.com. Check out what he does. Buy some stuff. Don't just check it out. Buy some stuff. Buy some stuff, because he does some really amazing stuff. And I'm hoping at some point we can get him out here to Fort Collins, and so you guys can see his work up close and personal. And I just want to, is there anything else that you would like to share before we sign off? Because I feel like you have given so much information, but not just information, knowledge, and just sharing about you have to work. You have to, you don't just get here. You don't just get to where you are by chance. It's work. It takes work. And I feel like you've done that. So for a young artist just coming up, what would you have to share with them?
The key word is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That's discipline. I mean, you have to get up every day and tell yourself, I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do this. When your friends call you and they want to do something that sounds fun, you have to say, no, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. But you have to have that discipline with everything, not just with your creative process. You have to have it with your schooling, mm-hmm. your whole attitude, your mindset. You have to discipline yourself. You really do. I mean, you have to. It's imperative now. Don't give up. No matter how hard it is, no matter. One of the reasons I stayed so much by myself because I didn't want to hear all the negativity. So I just found a place where I could be by myself. And I didn't hear any negativity. And then not only did I not hear any negativity, when I came out of being by myself, I created something. So when they asked me, what did you do and where were you at that particular time? I didn't have to explain. I just said, go look at that. Go look at what I did. I didn't come out saying, oh, I've just been sitting around doing nothing. I've had all these great things in my head, but I didn't do anything with it. Well, my discipline allowed me to create something with it. And so I would just say, discipline yourself. Discipline yourself with passion, with love and passion. You must have that. It's imperative that you have that. Don't give up. Even in these trying times right now, these are horrible times that we're living in, but find something good from it, because there is something good from it. There really is. There's good. There's a lot of good in the world. That's my job, is create something good and something beautiful. It is. And I never gave up. And to this day, and I still get a lot of negative feedback, from people that don't want to, keep their eyes open. And, there's a lot of jealousy and dissension. And that's, with family and friends. But, once you get to a point where you realize this is what I'm going to be, none of that stuff makes any difference. And when you learn what you learn, share it. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Give it back, because it wasn't yours from the beginning. It was a gift that was given to you. Give it back. Give it back. Teach someone else. Help someone else learn. When you see someone creative struggling, help them. Help them. If you can help them, help them. It will only come back to you.
Thank you so much. That makes so much sense. It's interesting because that has been like a thread throughout, just a thread throughout this year of listening to other artists, sharing, give back, give back, give back, give back. When you learn something, give back. Don't just hold on to it. And also discipline. You have to get out there and do the work. It's not by chance. It's not by happenstance. You have to get out there and do the work. You have to discipline yourself. And then once you get it, then you give it and you share it with other people. And so thank you so much for being a part of the Beauty of Blackness, Black art and culture, and allowing me to share your story, share what you do on our show, and just sharing with me. I have gotten so much out of our interview together, and I'm hoping even more so that we'll talk more. So once again, this is Chukes, the sculptor Chukes, with us tonight. Go and check out his artwork, chukesarts.com. You can check him out. Oh, here, hold on. Let me make that bigger because I want them to see it.
Get my catalog for Identity Theft. Identity Theft, Creations from a Social Conscious by Chukes. It's available on
Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, yes. It's $29. Right. Please get this. It's very important information about what is going on today in Black America. It's a show that I've been promoting for the last 4 years, and it's ongoing. I had to stop because of the pandemic, but I'm still going to keep pushing this show.
Okay,
so, catalog.
All right, so that's a catalog?
Yes, it's a catalog.
Okay, so it's a catalog that you can get on Amazon. Yeah. I'm going to pick me up one. Yeah. So definitely, it's called Identity Theft. Pick that up on Amazon. You can pick it up on Amazon. And they can just look up under Chukes Art, or as far as the title, or is it under your full name?
It's Identity Theft: Creations from a Social Conscience by Chukes.
Okay,
so all right. Probably type in the entire title, because it's new on Amazon. So Amazon's kind of strange if you don't get any reviews or anything like that. It's way down at the bottom, so it may take you a little while to find it. But please find it. Please write a review, please.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm just gonna see if I can find it really quick, and then I can post it. Okay, by Chukes. Then that way people can see where it is on Amazon. So I'm just gonna look up Amazon right quick, which is the beauty of being able to have things on your having things on your computer. Let's see. All right, there. I think this is it. Oh yeah. So you can actually pick this up on Amazon. It's right here. I'm gonna just show you guys. So definitely, you can go and pick it up. It's $29, and it is a paperback. It's Identity Theft: Creations from a Social Conscience. And it looks like a pretty phenomenal book. So definitely go and check that out. And then you guys can actually pick up the book and go through it. He has some amazing art in that book. And so definitely, yeah, support what he's doing, support what he's about. I think it's absolutely amazing. I can't wait to get one because I want to see it. And I think your work is absolutely phenomenal. So if you, I want to talk to you after the show. I'm going to go ahead and close the show out, and then I'll talk to you. I'll put you, you'll be in the back, and I'll talk to you right after the show. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. You guys have been awesome hanging out with us. Definitely go and check him out on Facebook and Instagram. He's under Chukes Art. Go by his website, check out his website. Definitely go and check out Hands of Clay on YouTube. You will actually love it. Once again, this is the Beauty of Blackness Fine Art Show, Art and Culture. We are on every Saturday at 6 o'clock, interviewing artists, musicians, all kinds in the Black art culture. So definitely come and check that out. I am your host, Louise Cutler. I have totally enjoyed having you guys here, spending time with you, and all of that. So thank you again for coming by and spending that time with us.